What is toxic positivity?
Well, I have run into that on more than one occasion, and I actually had somebody who did some work for me, and he was working for an organization, and he said the organization, and he said the phrase, is just filled with toxic positivity. And I said, wow, what a delicious phrase. I'm not going to name him or the organization, but I said, what a delicious phrase. Tell me more. And he says, well, every time I bring up a problem, they say, yeah, we'll get to that. But you know, you're so good. And he'd say, yeah, what about this? I need this support. Yeah, we'll get to that. But you're so good. And it was like every response was, yeah, but you're so good and blah, blah, blah. They ended up, it was toxic because everything was so positive and they put a happy face on it. Everything had a happy smiley face on it, when in fact, they weren't solving any real problems. The problems at the core that this employee was trying to deal with in terms of doing his job better, literally, for the organization. He ended up leaving that organization. I know another organization I was working with, a nonprofit, where highly skilled artists decided to leave an organization because the organization was ripe with everything is wonderful, and it wasn't so wonderful. And instead of honestly and robustly dealing with underlying issues or concerns, it became untenable for them to work. And at the core, interestingly enough, in both of these cases, the core, it seems like counterintuitive. In both the cases that I'm concerned with, it was a lack of respect. You don't respect me enough to deal with a real problem I'm bringing to you and I need your help on. You don't respect me enough to tell me the truth. And so it is dealing with human beings. So, you know, we oftentimes think of toxic leadership as somebody's negative and demanding and those types of things. I have a good friend of mine who's an expert in toxic leadership, and he wrote his articles and did his research in the military, and you got to do it this way, or I'll fire you, or whatever, and I'll demote you, or whatever. But on the flip side, there's toxic positivity, which has exactly the same effect in debilitating the organization and causing good people to leave.
The research shows, and we've studied this and others have as well, that successful organizations are able to identify the good things that are going on and the things that aren't going well all of the time. And the things that aren't going well, another word for that is the problems. So let's identify what the problems are and surface them honestly so smart people can work on them and solve them collaboratively. Because if everything is great and you bury the problems, you'll never improve. So, we didn't write this book at all to be a political statement, but a great example right now is look at what's happening in our economy, in our world. We've got problems at the border, we've got problems with inflation, we've got problems with international war, we've got problems with crime, and it's almost like there's a group of people who want to identify the problems and there's a group of people who want to cover them up. If we don't surface those problems and work on them constructively, we'll never solve them. And we're trying to be positive in a toxic way by ignoring the fact that they're there and they need to be solved. They're not going to get better on their own. Any problem is like that. You've got to address it and solve it squarely and honestly in order to make progress.
Let me give you a specific example. I had a student several years ago who was a very good student, and she was spectacular. And when I do work with students, work with student teams, I take them out in the hall and say, this is what you're doing well, and this is what you need to work on. And it's always the same conversation. Here's where you're going right, here's where you're wrong. And the first time I took her out in the hall and said that, her and her group, I could just tell something was up. She wasn't happy. And it happened again and happened again. And she was in a number of classes. And then at the end of near her end of her career, she said she became very committed to what we were doing and the approach. At the end of her career, she said, "I just wanted you to know something, Professor Clampett. I hated you for 1 year." And I said, "Why?" "Because you were the only professor who ever told me I needed to improve on anything. All through my high school, I was the A student. I was the one who everybody thought was wonderful. My teachers never criticized me. And now I resent that. All those years of all those teachers who never gave me any feedback at all on how to get better. You're the only one who did that." I was like stunned. I could tell something was a little off at the beginning. I could also see her change throughout the couple of years that she was working with me. She ended up asking me to read something at her wedding, as a matter of fact, because she was so taken aback by that. And I think that's toxic positivity. Her educational experience was toxic positivity. And it goes back to coddling. We don't need to coddle people. They're tough. And we can be helpful, and we can be encouraging, but we also say there's some issues we need to deal with. And so I think she was raised in a toxic positivity educational environment. And we can be respectful of people. In fact, I would argue that if we don't provide feedback about things we can get better on and do better, we're not being respectful of the person. And so that's something that why the word toxic positivity and why that phrase just resonated so much with me.